So, Stephen, Supermicro, Dell, HPE, Cisco, and others have introduced the first server lines based on Intel's recent announcement of the fourth generation Xeon processors. Of course, Nvidia is also supporting these new processors with their H100 DGX platform. Let's take a closer look under the hood and see how these Sapphire Rapids bring new capabilities to these devices.
Now that the Sapphire Rapids products have been officially announced, we're seeing a lot more people talking about what the processor can do. And I think it's important to recognize, as we mentioned last week, that Sapphire Rapids has actually been out there for about a year. There's been early testers. There's been a lot of people using the platform. In fact, I'm hearing that some of the hyperscalers are already rolling it out in volume for customers. There certainly have been a lot of appearances of Sapphire Rapids servers at events like OCP and supercomputing, running CXL, all that stuff. And so we're finally getting a look at where the rubber meets the road, which is servers and storage devices that are using Sapphire Rapids Xeon in production. And it's coming from basically all the companies. I don't want to give short shrift to the others, Inspur and people like that, but I'm really going to focus here on the ones that matter the most to me and my customers and my community here at Enterprise Tech. So we're going to start a little bit with Supermicro. We'll talk about Dell, HPE, Cisco, Nvidia, as you mentioned. But really, I think it's safe to say that we're going to see Sapphire Rapids from everybody. So starting off with Supermicro, so we've got the X13 generation of servers now. Supermicro has numerically numbered theirs, and it's so helpful because you can know kind of which generation the server is just from the model name. And of course, Supermicro covers everything across the spectrum. Full disclosure, I bought a Supermicro server for the office, and that's probably what's running in the cloud. It's probably what's running in the software-defined storage solution that you're running, that sort of thing. They're everywhere, hyper-converged. And the reason that they're everywhere is because this is a company that does a really nice job of putting together pretty standard enterprise-grade servers in a variety of configurations. And that's really what we've got here with the X13 generation. We've got everything from the Blade, Super Blade stuff. We've got Big Twin. We've got Grand Twin. We've got their Ultra servers. We got their storage servers. We've got Edge. We even have 8-socket servers from Supermicro, and including ultra high density servers that use the multi-socket design from Intel to bring the most cores possible in a server platform, which is pretty cool. And pretty much everything in between, because again, this is Supermicro. So I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of where this stuff goes once we start to get it in production with the many OEMs that use Supermicro in production. The next thing I want to turn to is Dell, of course. So Dell's PowerEdge line is really important in enterprise tech. We see them everywhere. We also see these a lot with OEMs using Dell as a hardware platform. Dell, of course, has implemented the 4th generation Xeons in the usual suspects, your regular, PowerEdge, DL360, DL380, those kind of guys. We also have them in their, R series, the big ones. I think the biggest news here in the Dell line is the big guys, the R960, R860, their quad socket servers. Dell hadn't updated those for a long time because Cooper Lake was really designed, that was the 3rd generation 4 and 8 core Xeon, was really designed for hyperscalers more than for regular people like us. And so Dell really had a big jump here between the previous generation and the next generation for their quad socket servers. And I think that that's really exciting. We also had a big announcement from Dell on a partnership with Nvidia, that they're using a lot more Nvidia all across the range. I think that's great news for Dell. It's of course good for Nvidia as well. And overall, looking at the Dell range, I think that this is a solid update, especially, as I said, if you want a ton of processor cores.
Steven, I feel like I'm missing. I don't want to jump in there, but I feel like I'm missing out. I used to have a few of those DL 360s actually here in my house, in my basement. And you're wondering why? Because I was a nerd and I liked hardware and building things. I think I'm missing out on some of this fourth generation. Anybody got a 360 lying around I can upgrade?
I think that, hey, Michael, hook a guy up, would you?
I'll be right back.
So let's move on to the HPE side. We on HPE, they have already announced their Gen 11 server lineup with AMD and ARM servers as well, as we covered on the rundown previously. Well, now the Gen 11 line, unsurprisingly, includes fourth generation Xeon. It, again, is pretty much what you'd expect. I think for me, the big news on the HPE side was more what they're doing it in other areas. They've updated their storage systems with the fourth generation Xeons, and I think that that's going to deliver quite a lot of benefit for storage customers. Finally, let me turn to our friends over at Cisco. As you are aware, UCS is one of the most important blade scalable platforms out there. And Cisco has also adopted the fourth generation Xeons. One of my questions for Cisco was relating to the X series. So if you remember, Cisco released this really modular, almost disaggregated X series line a couple of years ago. And I was curious how that would play with PCIe 5 and with CXL. Well, to hear Cisco talk about it, both the C series and the X series are updated, and they've had no trouble at all adapting to these new technologies. And I do expect that we'll be seeing CXL rolling out, and I think that that's going to be a pretty powerful technology in combination with the X series fabric, and of course Cisco's really nice Intersight management platform.
I like what Cisco's done with their UCS system, and now I think this is just going to enhance it a lot more in the condensed platform that they utilized.
Absolutely. And the final platform that we'll talk about here is Nvidia, of course. So their DGX H100. Now, of course, there's been a lot of talk about Grace Hopper, which is their ARM and Hopper GPU supercomputing disaggregated platform, which is totally awesome. But it, of course, where the rubber meets the road is, as I was talking to in the Dell section, is basically having the Hopper series GPUs rolled out everywhere. And that's really, I think, what we're going to be seeing. They've got a new DGX. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of more announcements of other OEMs building NVIDIA-powered systems for AI processing based on the DGX platform. And I think this is more a vote of confidence than anything else. I mean, we saw Jensen Huang right there in the Intel keynote as the part of the launch for Sapphire Rapids, along with like everybody else in the industry, I might mention. But Jensen was right there at the beginning, and so I think that in the partnership between Dell and Nvidia remains strong, and I think that that's great for overall enterprise tech. John, what's your take? And now that we've kind of gone through, I know it's kind of exhaustive. What's your take overall on what we're seeing as the upgrades here?
I'm seeing a lot of investment and enhancement into the upgrades. I'm wondering where, we're at the fourth generation, where third generation went, but we can get there another time. The Supermicro had an interesting story when they were kind of originally getting this going, where the system, and we got to share out this article on how they gave him the actual system and put it in his car outside of a box and said, yeah, this is the only one. How nerve-wracking is that for having your first very prototype system sitting in the back of your car? I think the investment into the fourth generation is a long time coming, and an announcement for it, which will enhance these hyperscalers. There are so many that are going to utilize it. We're not going to call them out individually, but you have to realize that what they're doing, so for the Xeon processors and enhancing the hyperscalers that are being used by these companies, there are still physical servers in the data centers where you don't have to worry about, but you still have to improve upon them for the end user and the customer. So I think this is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, absolutely. And special shout out to friend of the show, Patrick Kennedy, as mentioned with Serve the Home, toting around the only one in the back of his rental car. I love you, Patrick. And I love your fun videos with Supermicro. That was great. Yeah, my take overall is that it's pretty unsurprising what's been announced because, of course, we kind of knew what was coming. We've been watching the development of Sapphire Rapids this whole year, and now that it's here, we're saying, yep, it's pretty much what we thought. For me, the thing that I'm really looking forward to is what happens once CXL is more embraced, because as you can see with, for example, the UCSX series and with some of the Supermicro stuff and some of the things that Nvidia are doing, there's a lot of interest in disaggregating and building new form factors. And CXL enables that in a way that we haven't really seen up until now. That's what we're talking about on our Utilizing CXL podcast, is sort of where this technology will go. And one way that I think it's going to go, and I think that we're going to be watching for this in 23 and 24, is new server form factors, more flexible form factors, where memory is not so tied to the motherboard with the CPU and so on, where CPUs maybe even are a little bit more modular, and ultimately where we go to more of a rack scale architecture, where you can have a rack of memory and a rack of storage and a rack of processing and a rack of accelerators, and all that just sort of works together. We don't have that yet. We weren't going to get that because literally this AMD and Intel just announced CXL support like in the last month. So that's new. We're still at 1.1. But hold your horses, because I think what these servers look like in 2024 and 2025 is going to be radically different. And I think we're going to have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about here on the Rundown.